Greetings, Guardians. This is Olympus Alliance. And today, we're answering another request that has been appearing more and more in our comments. Leonel teams. Especially from newer Guardians who have Leonel, want to build around him, but aren't exactly sure which heroes can bring the best out of him. And that's exactly why Olympus Alliance is here. Not every video needs to be about the newest hero, the newest relic, or whatever is dominating the endgame today. Sometimes you simply want to know, what can I actually do with the hero I have? So today we're looking at 4 Leonel teams that can work, why the heroes fit together, and most importantly, the synergy behind each composition. Because you already know our philosophy. 5 individually strong heroes don't automatically create a strong team. The skills need to connect. The timing needs to make sense. And every hero needs to bring something that helps the others do their job. So let's begin with our first composition. Leonel, Yasmine, Guus, Soleil, and Aidan. And immediately, you can see what we're trying to create here. Leonel and Yasmine give us an aggressive physical foundation, while Guus, Soleil, and Aidan provide the support necessary to give that aggression time to work. Yasmine is especially important because once she gets moving, she can become extremely difficult for the opponent to contain. But damage alone isn't enough. You need to create an environment where your damage dealers are allowed to perform. That's where Soleil becomes very interesting. Control and negative effects can completely interrupt an aggressive composition at the wrong moment, and Soleil gives us protection against exactly that kind of disruption. If Leonel or Yasmine loses momentum because of control at the wrong time, the entire attack can slow down. Soleil helps reduce that risk. Then we have Aidan. Aidan gives the composition another defensive layer through his protection and sustain, helping keep the important pieces alive while the offensive side of the team develops. And Guus fits beautifully between those two sides of the composition. You're not simply throwing 5 attackers onto the battlefield and hoping someone dies first. You're creating pressure. But you're protecting that pressure. Leonel and Yasmine can focus on doing their jobs while the rest of the team makes it considerably harder for the opponent to shut them down. For newer players especially, this is an important lesson. Sometimes making your damage dealer stronger doesn't mean adding another damage dealer. Sometimes it means giving them another second to fight. Another opportunity to activate. Another layer of protection. And that can be far more valuable. Now let's move to our second team. Leonel, Yasmine, Alvana, Berna, and Octavia. This one takes us in a different direction. And I really like it because we're bringing several forms of support around Leonel and Yasmine rather than relying purely on offensive pressure. Berna immediately gives this composition something incredibly valuable. Sustain. We've spoken many times recently about how influential Berna has become, and there's a reason she keeps appearing in powerful teams. Keeping a dangerous hero alive can be just as important as increasing that hero's damage. Leonel and Yasmine need opportunities to continue applying pressure. Berna helps create those opportunities by making the composition much harder to break. Then we have Alvana. Alvana brings another layer of protection and support, making this lineup increasingly uncomfortable for physical opponents to break through. And then, Octavia. This is where the composition becomes particularly annoying. Octavia's defensive contribution against magical pressure and the value she can create through dodge mechanics add another dimension to the team. So look at what we're building. The enemy wants to pressure Leonel and Yasmine physically. There are defensive mechanisms making that more difficult. They want to solve the problem with magical pressure. Octavia brings another layer they need to consider. Meanwhile, Burner is helping the team recover and maintain its presence on the battlefield. And while the opponent is trying to solve all of those problems, Leonel and Yasmine are still attacking. That's the beauty of this composition. It doesn't necessarily need to win immediately. It can survive. It can frustrate. It can create time. And every extra second can give your offensive heroes another opportunity to take control of the fight. Now let's move into something much more aggressive. Tristan, Oya, Leonel, Yasmine, and Guus. Guardians? This is where we take the gloves off. If the previous composition was about creating layers of survival around Leonel and Yasmine, this team is much more interested in creating physical pressure. Tristan immediately changes the character of the lineup. When you're building physical compositions, one of the biggest questions is always the same. How are you going to get through the opponent's defenses? You can have enormous physical attack. But if the enemy is capable of absorbing that pressure, those beautiful damage numbers don't mean nearly as much. Tristan helps create the conditions for your physical attackers to become more threatening. Then you add Oya. Oya brings another aggressive piece into the composition and helps create exactly the kind of battlefield where physical pressure can snowball very quickly. And behind all of that, Leonel and Yasmine. Now the opponent isn't dealing with one obvious source of danger. They're dealing with several. That's important. If a team depends entirely on one damage dealer, sometimes the counter is relatively straightforward. Control that hero. Neutralize that hero. Kill that hero. Fight over. But when several heroes can contribute meaningful pressure, choosing what to stop becomes much more difficult. And Guus once again gives the lineup an important supporting presence, so that all this aggression isn't completely reckless. This is probably the team of the four where I'd be looking for the most direct physical pressure. Tristan, Oya, Leonel, Yasmine. There isn't much mystery about what this team wants. It wants to attack. It wants to create momentum. And once that momentum starts, it wants to keep pushing until the opposing formation collapses. And finally, we have our fourth team. Leonel, Yasmine, Burner, Crow, and Guus. And this one is very interesting because now we're combining the Leonel and Yasmine offensive core with two heroes we've been discussing a lot recently. Burner and Crow. Burner once again provides that extremely valuable sustain. But Crow changes the way the opponent is allowed to play. Crow brings disruption into the composition. And that's important because every moment the enemy spends dealing with disruption, is another moment Leonel and Yasmine can continue creating pressure. This is where synergy isn't always about directly increasing someone's damage number. Disrupting the opponent can indirectly make your damage dealers significantly more effective. If the enemy's rhythm is broken, if their abilities aren't arriving when expected, if their plan is being interrupted, your own heroes gain space to operate. Then Burner helps ensure that your team has the sustain to take advantage of that additional time. And Guus completes the structure around the offensive core. So once again, Leonel and Yasmine aren't being asked to do absolutely everything themselves. They have support. They have sustain. They have disruption around them. And that allows them to concentrate on what we actually put them into the composition to do. Create pressure and help finish the battle. And Guardians, that's the important takeaway from all four of these teams. There isn't only one way to build around Leonel. You can take the more protected route with Soleil and Aidan. You can create a highly sustainable composition with Alvana, Verna, and Octavia. You can go much more aggressively into physical pressure with Tristan and Oya. Or you can combine sustain and disruption through Burner and Crow. Which one should you build? That depends on your account. And this is particularly important for the newer Guardians who requested this video. Don't destroy your resources trying to copy a team simply because you saw 5 heroes together on a screen. Look at what you already have. If your Yasmine is developed, that's already an important starting point. If you already invested heavily into Burner, maybe the Burner variations make more sense for your account. If your Tristan and Oya are already strong, then you have the foundation for a much more aggressive physical approach. If you have Soleil and Aidan developed, you already have excellent tools to protect your offensive core. Build around your account. Not someone else's account? That's how you progress efficiently. And above everything else, understand why the team works. Because once you understand the synergy, you don't need someone to give you every single lineup. You can begin making your own adjustments. You can identify what the opponent is doing. You can remove one hero, bring another, change the support, change the protection, and suddenly you're not just copying teams anymore. You're building them. And that's exactly where Hero Wars becomes much more interesting. So Guardians, those are 4 Leonel teams we are highlighting today. Leonel, Yasmine, Guus, Soleil, and Aidan. Leonel, Yasmine, Alvana, Verna, and Octavia. Tristan, Oya, Leonel, Yasmine, and Guus. And Leonel, Yasmine, Burner, Crow, and Guus. Now we want to hear from you. Which Leonel composition are you currently using? Have you found another combination that's performing particularly well? And most importantly, which heroes teams do you want Olympus Alliance to cover next? Keep sending us those requests. Because whether you're an endgame Guardian chasing the latest meta or a newer player trying to understand how to build your first serious teams, there will always be a place for those requests here. Stay tuned. Stay sharp. And as always, salute and friendship.